Welcome to the Reset Mantra. I'm your host, Sabina Maharjan. This podcast aims to support your journey in resetting your mind, body, and soul by sharing insightful stories and conversations with experts and guests from diverse backgrounds. We have a trailblazer in our show today. She's an author with roots stretching from Honduras to New Jersey. Her story is one of unwavering resilience and boundless ambition. As a single parent, Navy veteran, and MBA holder, she has conquered every obstacle in her path. Today, Brenda thrives as a senior BA in financial technology, where she expertly merges her multifaceted life experiences with a passion for writing. Through her work, Brenda tackles complex investment concepts, empowering others to take control of their financial futures. Join us as we delve into Brenda's extraordinary journey, a testament to the power of perseverance and the art of turning challenges into triumphs. Brenda, a very warm welcome to our show. I am so honored to have you and just be able to chat with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Sabina, for having me, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine. So there's a lot that I want to ask you, and I was telling you off the camera as well. But to kick things off, tell us about who you are and tell us about your financial journey and how you got to this point in your investment journey. And I know you have a very interesting, diverse experiences. So talk to me about that.
So I'm going to start with the first question. Who is Brenda Paz? So I would, if I'm going to summarize it, I would say Brenda is a mother, a daughter, a friend. She is, what else? Let me see. You know, that's one of the harder questions, right? When people ask you, like, who are you?
Yes.
Let's say, like, oh my goodness. I'm a warrior, right? If I want to call myself a warrior because I've been through a lot, and recently I have become an author, self-published author of the book Max It Out. I'm a Navy veteran. During the day, I am a senior business analyst in a financial technology company, and I basically write documentation, specification, things like that for electronic payments. So that's kind of like my specialty. I am a single woman with a blessing of one beautiful 19-year-old daughter who's in college now. So, and I have 3 fur babies, 2 dogs and a cat. And what was your second question?
So, wanted to know about, your financial investment journey. How did you start and how did you get to this point
Oh,
in
absolutely.
overall? Yeah.
So I started investing, believe it or not, in my early 20s. I think I was 20 years old. I was in the military, and someone planted a seed. They said, have you ever heard about a Roth IRA? So I had a supervisor, we call them LPO, leading petty officers, in the military, and we were just sitting around. I don't remember if it was during lunch or maybe we were about to leave, right? We were just lounging around, and he's like, you guys should consider a Roth IRA, and I'm like, I don't know what a Roth IRA is. I got curious, so it just stuck in my head. He planted the seed, but the drive of investing, of making money, of wealth building, right? That was because of where I come from, basically. Growing up, I come from a country where, we don't have opportunities, especially as a woman. We didn't have opportunities. And emigrating to the United States, I would still live in a condition that I didn't like, right? I was a little girl and I would be like, oh my God, how come they have a house? I have pets, by the way, everyone, just to let you know. There's something going around. It's like the coughing, my pet is choking on himself.
We have 2 guests for multiple guests today.
So, growing up, I had friends who had like a car, a truck, a restaurant. They have nice homes, and I would be living in like a basement that flooded or an apartment that was just, not very nice, but I mean, I was still thankful, right, that I had a place to live, but I just always wanted more. For whatever reason, I just said, I want a house. I want to live in a nice home. Like I want to be able to enjoy certain things. That I would see people like go to Six Flags and we couldn't afford that. We could not afford anything. So that kind of like this set that fire under me that I just thought I want to be somebody. I want when I get older, like I want to start investing. So when it really started was when I joined the military and I got that seed planted and I started investing in a Roth IRA. I just called the bank and just said, hey, there's this Roth IRA thing going on. And what is it? And I just want to invest in it. And I didn't know how much to invest in. Like I had no idea. I was like blinded. So I just said, you know what, take $25. That's all I could afford at the time. And actually in my book, I printed and I show a little chart because you can go to socialsecurity.gov, myssi.gov, and print out all your employment like history and your salary, and you can see that I started at in 1995. It's like $500 or something like that, and then you can see like every year how much I was making. So I wasn't making a lot in 2000. That's when I joined the military. So I started with $25 a month, and then as I started my salary started increasing, or I started ranking or changing jobs when I got out. Then I started like getting more serious on investing because I saw the growth in my account. So that also instilled in me and put that drive in me that, hey, you know what? I'm liking this. I like seeing that money there. So that kind of like where it started. And then later on, 2008 came. And 2008 came, I saw that account drop. I think I lost like $35,000. And I was looking at my Sony Vaio and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Should I, that's when that fear comes in. Like, should I take the money out? Should I leave it in? I wasn't sure. So that's when I started really educating myself with, reading books and helped me out with that uncertainty, that part, right, of tackling the fear of losing money in the market. So I didn't take out my money. And I just kind of started re-strategizing, learning more. And I just said, I'm going to learn this. And that's kind of like my whole journey till now. So now I want to educate the masses, right? Especially women who have that fear or, they feel uncertain. They don't know. They have the same fears that I had of investing. That's why I wrote the book.
No, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. Just like you, I'm an immigrant. I'm from Nepal, and there we had some concepts of savings, but this whole thing about 401k or I wasn't aware about the whole money managing. I saw how my parents dealt with finances. Sometimes we had enough, but sometimes there was scarcity of money. So that relationship of money and the time that I first thought of money as, okay, I am responsible, accountable for the money that I make and how to best make sure that I'm using it correctly to my benefit was perhaps in late 20s. So I can now recall and tell myself that, if only I was aware and have understood the importance of, learning how to invest and how to grow money, it would have been so easy for me, but it's never too late to start, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, I'm a little bit curious to know about like, what was your first memory of money? Like, how was your relationship with money or like your first memory that you think of? And was it like positive, negative? How was it?
Honestly, I'm doing right now on my Instagram a 30-day abundance and positive affirmations to help my followers or whoever wants to join it, kind of like the challenge, to talk positive and think positive about money, because most of the fears that you have about money, like if for the most part, I want everyone, like the listeners, if you have fears about money, it usually stems from childhood, from the people that are around you. I remember like, and it would be in Spanish, but like they would say things like, "Oh, only the rich people can afford that," or it was all negative. It was all penny pinching. It was, and I love my mom, and I don't think she's gonna listen to this podcast, but like till now, she still has that scarcity mentality, which if you study the psychology of the mind and money, if you stay in that scarcity mentality or that mentality of lack, you're always going to stay there. You're not going to progress. Your body, your mind keeps you stuck there. So yeah, absolutely. Like we would be, like I said, penny pinching or like always in saving mode. So from my 20, like from when I really started working until I would say even recently, I would say 2 years ago, I I was very frugal. I would call myself I'm frugal. I need coupons and I'm saving and I'm saving and I'm saving. But I came to a point where I had to like invest in myself. Like I had to really I've been learning about the law of attraction and how, if you are holding back on money like that, you're not really like letting the energy and money like flow, right? So I have been investing in myself a lot more than I typically do, but I trust in God that everything is going to work out. So like
Mm.
I've had a much better, like more positive mindset about money these past 2 or 3 years because I've been on like saving mode the whole time because I just wanted to save. I didn't want to spend, like I wouldn't even spend on myself. I would be like, no, that's too much money. Like $500 for something like, something that I want, like a facial or like, something nice. I wouldn't spend it. But I've learned that you got to treat yourself too. It's not
Mm.
always about, saving and saving and saving and not treating yourself. So.
I love it how you said that. And I also think that's very fascinating when you touched around law of attraction related to money. That's very interesting. I'm curious to know, or what do you mean when you say, is it some kind of like, okay, if people talk about manifesting a positivity into their life, is it manifesting money a similar approach, or is it different?
So it's basically always staying positive, right?
Mm,
Always having, being positive because a law in the law of attraction, it doesn't know the difference between the positive and negative. So like if you say negative, you're always going to get negative. So I always used to say like when it rains, it pours, or like problems come in three, right? Like it always comes in three. And it was true. And I'm like, oh, and then it'll keep you in that negative mindset. So you have to turn it into positive. You have to kind of stop what you're saying or what you're thinking, that thought, and then turn it into positive. So one of the things is, I'm pretty sure you're aware of Tony Robbins. He tells a story about when he was hungry and he only had like a few bucks left.
mm,
And he saw this little boy come into the restaurant. He was leaving, and he gave his last few dollars to the kid, right? And that kind of opened the floodgates of that like attraction. So he let go of those instead of saying, "Oh my God, these are the last few dollars that I have." He said, "You know what? With gratitude, with love, and without that fear that, oh my God, if I give these last $7, $10, I'm not gonna eat, right?" So he didn't even think about that. He just thought, "Oh my God, this boy has his mom and he's treating his mom, and I'm just gonna give my last few bucks to this little kid." When he released that money, that's kind of like the law of attraction. He released that money, then the money came back to him. So like later on, he got I believe a check from a friend that owed him money. So I've had that happen to me several times. Like I don't worry anytime I like do tips or I'm tipping or maybe like today, for example, there was someone that's asking for money for their kids. I said, you know what, I'm gonna grab the money because I feel like now I think of money as energy in a way,
mm,
and I say, you
mm,
know what, I'm grateful. Here you go, and when you release that, it comes back to you. So
mm. I love how you
I've
said
been
that.
I've been practicing that more often nowadays.
So it sounds to me like from what I heard, money is not about just physical, cash or anything, bank account or bank balance that we have. It's more about that mindset first,
Yeah.
about how
Yes.
you think of money. Like I hear
Yeah.
people often talk about money's evil, or people who have a lot of money are greedy, or
Yeah.
they don't donate enough or help. But we have this negative concept about money when in reality, the money is controlling us. We're not using it as an energy, just like you said, and using it to our advantage. It's something that's interesting when you talked about saving concept is. So I'm from Nepal, from a very small town, and the first memory of money that I have goes back to, one of my childhood times when we used to have a piggy bank. And in Nepalese, we used to call it kutruke. It's like a pottery piggy bank.
Yeah.
And it used to have that holes, and we used to drop money. And so I've learned to save for a rainy day, right? That would be the popular phrase that they use, save for a rainy day. And I once heard Jim Rohn saying, okay, if you save for a rainy day, you will
You,
get a rainy day for sure.
I just, I just thought that too. If you save for a rainy day, you're always gonna get a rainy day.
Yes.
Oh my God. Yeah, I just heard that. That's
So that stuck with me. And, like I was probably in 20s when I heard Jim Rohn say this. And I'm like, oh my God, I used to think that the secret to having more money or making sure you have enough is saving, but looks like I had this wrong the whole life, right? Like this whole
yeah.
time. So I wanted to ask you, if someone in their 20s, doesn't matter, regardless of age or background, if they are looking into investing, where do you start? Who do you listen to? And how do you fact check what you're listening or watching online videos? Are they even true? Of course, there's like updates, new research coming in, but in your research and experience, where should someone start?
So I actually put that in my book. So honestly, there are so many varieties. There's like over 8,500, like 8,500, or even might be even more mutual funds out there. Like it's
Mm,
mind-boggling, okay? And that's why I wrote the book the way I wrote it, because it's catered more towards the beginner investors, where to start. Now, how did I come up with that formula, or with that, that concept of like, this is where you should start? Is I basically like acquired knowledge, right? So after reading different books, I just said, you know what? There's a common denominator here, right? So you see a pattern. And I love Tony Robbins, and I love how much information he gives, but I feel like it was too much information at one point for beginner investors. So that's why I say, I think I need to do this. I need to create this book where it's like it just simplifies it, because there's just too much information. So where they would start, I mean, there are several options. What I've seen is, if you want to do it yourself, if you want to manage your money yourself, for example, if you do like a 3 fund portfolio, just to start, you can just do 3 fund portfolio. Now, this would be something that you have to do, like reallocate every year. So you have to look at it yearly to make sure that you are reallocating based on the percentages. So that would be US. So the first bucket would be US stocks. I think it's like 54% that you want to put of your money on that. Then you have 36% for international. And then you have the third bucket would be bonds, and that's around 10%. So that should equate to like 100%. So that would be for the funds that you want to manage, right? So let's say at the end of the year, like after a year or whatever of investing it, you have to check like how did your funds do? How did your index funds do? And then if you're too much on the stocks, let's say your stocks no longer 54% is like 60, and then so you start rebalancing. That's how you do the rebalance, right? Um, but there is another way to invest where it does it automatically. And I typically recommend that one to people who really do not want to touch their money. Like they do not want to rebalance things, or at least when you first start, so you can just start with that one. These are called Target Date Index Fund. They used to be called Target Aged, but I don't know why they changed it. I haven't done research as to why they changed it to Target Date. So that one, if you have a 401k, you'll see those typically are offered by your employer. And that what those do is basically they do have different funds within that target date. So it's an index fund that has three funds within it, but it automatically adjusts itself as you start getting near retirement. So that one I would probably suggest to beginner investors just to start and kind of like get your feet wet, and then later on maybe you want to try to you know what, I want to manage it myself, and then you can now do the three fund allocations. Yeah.
So it's
So
about like just getting started and then figuring out what works for you and how do you want to
correct.
balance and
Right,
remanage it.
right. So that's what I mean. It's like it's kind of like an individualized thing, right? So me personally, I've done both. But I just started thinking, why am I gonna like, it's long term. So I honestly do the target dates. But again, I for my daughter, I'm doing the because I started her, I gave her like a gift, graduation gift for her. So yeah, so I got her on a 3 bucket one, right? So I'm testing it out to see like, how that's going. And by the end of the year, I'm going to rebalance it myself. So, cause I'm managing her portfolio, but that's kind of like what I would recommend. Either you do it automatically, like you have it done automatically via target date, or you do a 3 fund portfolio.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Before I get to my another question, something that I want to acknowledge you mentioned that, first of all, congratulations to your daughter on
Thank
graduation.
you.
Did she graduate
Well,
recently?
from high school. So yeah, so
High
she's in
school.
college now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that her graduation gift that you gave her was a Roth IRA account.
Yes.
Okay, if someone's listening, I want people to know that this is one of the best gifts I've ever heard of. In recent times, instead of giving this fancy car, depending on what their budget is, giving a luxury bag or even a trip, I don't know. But this sounds a very realistic and a life lesson itself for a daughter from a mom. This is like a very this is a great gift, I think.
Well, thank you.
And financial independence, especially for us women of color, from all around the world. I think it's so important now more than ever because we do see a lot of gaps, right? As to, in terms of how much money we get paid, the kind of access we have in terms of getting knowledge to investing. So I think those are all great things to talk about. So I wanted to pivot a little bit towards in your book, you have, I know a list of money and life lessons, right? There are probably 20 of them.
Yes, 20.
And when I was just going through them, I felt, okay, Brenda, I think this book is not just a book on investing. This is a masterpiece on personal development and mindset as well.
Absolutely.
So talk to me about the correlation between financial investment, learning about investment, educating yourself about finances and your personal development. How are those two correlated in your opinion?
Well, again, when I started investing, I did it blindly. So there wasn't really any education there, right? So I have no idea between my 20s, and I think when I really started personal development was definitely in 2008 after that whole, ordeal. Sorry, my sister's my sister said there's like a message popped up. I'm like, what happened? I hope it's not emergency. So yeah, so that kind of like happened during after the 2008, where I'm like, oh my God, I'm afraid. I don't know what to do. Like, should I take the money? Should I not? And I didn't trust financial advisors. I just felt like they would not explain it to me in layman terms where I can understand it. So it would still like Charlie Brown, wah, 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 wah. I'm not sure if you know about Charlie Brown, the cartoons, but it's like I do not
Mm-hmm.
understand what they're
Mm-hmm.
saying. So like we're just throwing like mutual funds and this and that and an annuity, and I'm like, I don't know what they're saying. So that's when personal development came in, and I just said, you know what, I'm gonna start reading books. I think I started with Dave Ramsey was getting really big at the time, and he's advocate on the whole 6 steps, right? 6 baby steps. And then I started looking at his stuff, and I said, well, I'm already on like baby step this, right? Like I already have the step 1, which is saving whatever it is that he says, and then step 2 is an emergency fund, and this and that. I was like, I'm already past that. I was like, I could have written a book about that right back then. Um, and then I was like, okay, well, I had a friend of mine who she was investing. And again, like I never asked her, hey, can you teach me how to invest? Because I sometimes I felt like people back then would not share. Like they would not want to sit down. Or maybe that was just me thinking, right? That they don't want to tell me. So I just took it upon myself to learn. So that's where personal development. I started listening to the 4 pillars of investing, I think it's called. And then that one was a little bit complex. And I was like, oh, I kind of like this. This is complex. I'm going to learn it. And I just fell in love with it. And then somehow my brain just went, the light, you know what I mean? Just turned on. So I was like, whoa,
Hmm.
I understand it. So,
Personally, I think for me, it wasn't until late 20s when I had to become really intentional about investing and setting financial goals. And I continue to navigate and learn from it. So I wanted to ask you how important it is for people to be intentional and set goals towards their investment journey.
I mean, that's something that I would say that I did, and I wrote a lot. Like I used to write like where I wanted to be. And it was not only money wise, right? It was like every area of my life. But I focused mainly on my career and money and building wealth during my 20s and 30s. So I would write down all the time, like, where do I want to be? Like, what do I want to have? But and again, you have to be intentional. But one of the reasons why I really got more intentional was because I was living paycheck to paycheck at one point in my life during my military time, and that I did not like that stress. I was like, oh my God, I had to get a second job, and it was just really stressful to just think that I had to pay the rent, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to cover it. Right? I was helping my family at the time. So from then on, I said, no, going forwards, I'm gonna have this amount of money in my account. And if it goes below like $1 for that goal, I'm not gonna spend anymore. I'm done spending. So that's kind of
Mm.
like how I started. Like just you have to be intentional, right? And again, there's this whole, I think I talk about mental health as well. You got to take care of yourself mentally because you can't make money decisions if you are going through depression, and I hate saying that word, but and anxiety. Like if you're going through some type of mental health, like even family member, death, or and you haven't really tackled it or haven't really, figured out how to move past that, you're not going to be able to make wise money decisions. So
So it's
very
important
important.
for, yeah. So it looks like it's important for people to not make a financial decision when they're not in a good space in life. For
Absolutely.
example, going through, anxiety or a difficult time in life, right? Certainly
Absolutely.
depression. I know this is something that you talk about as one of the lessons that prioritizing for mental health in your
Mhm.
book as well. And I'm sure, our listeners, when they get the book, they can know all the ins and out of what the details are inside the book. Also, what I wanted to ask you about was, so in your book, you talk about turning setbacks into opportunities. Tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Well, there's setbacks. So I always think of life, right? You think of life as a roller coaster, and life is not linear. Like it's not just a smooth ride, right? So there's a lot of times that, for example, 2008 was a setback
Mm,
because again, $35,000. I'm like, oh my God. Like
yeah.
there's two ways you could approach it, right? There's two, you could either go through the negative path and start freaking out and taking your money out, or you're like, you know what, let me regather, let me figure out what I'm gonna do, like let me educate myself more, let me talk to somebody, let me reach out to this person or that person, and then you just say it's a learning lesson, I'm not gonna sell, I'm gonna continue just investing, write it out, this is gonna get better, you know what I mean? So anything in life, whether it is, whether it's a death of your dog or your family, it's a setback. Those are setbacks. And then you just take those into opportunities, your growth, and make it positive. I'm thankful. Thank God. I had a wonderful time with my dog. My dog was wonderful to me and I love him and we're going to keep moving, and just keeping positive at all times,
Mm,
even through setbacks. And
mm.
sometimes it's not that simple, but especially, when there's a family member, something happens with a family member, it's tougher, right? That's a real tough situation for someone to be in, but I think there are many people that make it through. It's just part of the human experience, right? It's human life experience that we have to go through. So
Yes, yes, we all make it through those difficult times. Yeah, I think that was a wonderful reminder because often when
yeah,
we are in the dark times, it seems like we can't see anything. Everything's uncertain. What's my next step? But it's important, like you emphasize, to remain hopeful and make sure that you turn those setbacks into opportunities when the time comes, right? You have to
absolutely.
give yourself that time needed as well. What I wanted to ask you another question was something that's really intriguing for me that you mentioned in your book is about recognizing your own value, right? When it comes to investing.
Yes.
And so I
Yeah.
was curious to know, do you think, in your opinion, the amount of money that we make is tied to our self-worth, or tell us more about, recognizing our value with where we are in terms of finances in our own life.
So I love that you asked that question, because my lesson was more towards um knowing your worth and your value when you are navigating through like jobs, right? The job space. So in
Mm,
your career, what is your worth, right? Because sometimes a lot of people don't negotiate salary. That's
mm,
major for me, because that's something that when I'm doing coaching to my veterans, I do free coaching in Veterati for veterans. Um, I typically, even like my sisters, I always tell them, like, don't take the first offer. Know your worth. And that's major for me. Like I've learned throughout my journey that I will not take the first offer. Like I'm going to sell myself because I know what I'm worth, right? But in terms of investing, you can also you can also ask yourself that question. What are you worth paying yourself 20%, 10%? Because there's a lot of people that are so please don't be mad at me, but there's so many people that are so negative that when I tell them, like, you have to pay, they're like, oh, I don't have enough money, and there's just so many excuses that they have. And it just mind boggles me, because I feel like you don't love yourself to pay yourself 10%. Like, you are so worried that, oh, you got to pay this, you got to pay that. No, pay yourself first and then worry about paying the rest. Right.
mm.
So do you feel worthy of saving, of investing? Like, sometimes it's a worth thing, right? It's like a worthy thing, a worthy question, self-worth. So that I definitely would tie that into investing.
No, I absolutely agree with that. It's,
Hmm.
when you mentioned about the jobs that we get, and that pay gap is a big topic, right? When it comes to women, in the field of IT especially. And
Hmm.
and I also love how you touched about, okay, how much do we think we are worthy of? And the point that I'm understanding is it's about not settling for less than what you deserve, right? You know your worth and then you stick to it. Be discernment, like be intentional about what you're worth it and standing up for
Hmm.
it. So I think those are
Hmm.
great life lessons, that one can definitely take away
Hmm.
from this conversation.
It's funny because I just told a story about um manifesting or setting this goal for the salary that I wanted to be making by a certain year. And because I knew in my heart what I was worth. And I was like, I work really hard. Like I have integrity at this job, and
Mm,
I know that I am, what I bring to the table at work. So I said I should be making this much money.
mm,
And I said it with intention. I think I even wrote it down. Like every time I write things down, and I did not know, like going through Tony Robbins seminars, right? Um, Sometimes when you write it down, right, you have that reticular activating system, the RAS, where like it makes it real, right? But you kind of have to feel it, and you kind of have to like have the emotion attached to it. So I used to do that all the time. I wrote it down. I said, I'm going to be making this much money. And I even told a coworker of mine, I was like, I'm going to be making this much money by this year.
mm, mm,
and
mm.
and it's so funny because I did. But I
Yeah.
didn't know how. Like it was crazy because I didn't know how. I didn't know when it was going to happen. And I actually took a major pay cut. I was going through some stuff after, like, right before the pandemic. So before the pandemic, I was going through a situation, and then bam, the pandemic came, right? So it was like back to back for me. But before that, I said I'm going to be making this much money, and I told him, and then I ended up making exactly what I said, the exact amount,
Mm,
and then I was like, oh my God. I even surprised myself. And I told my coworker, I'm like, remember I said that? And of course, he's a Christian man, and we're like, yeah, that's God, that's all God.
mm,
So I'm Christian too. So I'm like, that's gotta be God. Like he heard me, right? So or the anyone else who believes in a higher power or the universe, but that's the higher power.
mm-hmm,
But you have to intentionally know what you're worth, and you have to kind of like say it with intensity and certainty
mm,
that that's what you're going to be making. So
mm.
I'm just happy I did that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like a lot of people might question, okay, what's the fact behind it? Is it science backed? But it is science backed, right? Where you
It
have the
is.
intention and you have a clear intention, you add the emotion. Like you said, I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins as well. And I think all of his speeches are backed by science. It's all about the neuroscience, how our brain works. Our brain do really create the reality. It's just a matter that
It
if we
does.
believe in it, it does. If we don't believe in it,
And
it
can I
doesn't.
tell you? And can I tell you, like, I'm a prime example of
Hmm.
why I know this is true because it hasn't been manifested in my relationships, and I'm going to tell you why. Because in finances and in wealth, I have been so certain. I have been so positive. I have been so focused. And I have been able to achieve what I said I was going to achieve. But I can recall that in relationships, I would say negative things like, I'm never going to get married. I was 15, I would say that. Again, everything stemmed because of things that I've experienced, I've seen, and things like that. And then so when I started getting into like the seminars and trying to understand, I'm like, oh my God, that was like breakthrough for me. Breakthrough, right? When people say, "Oh, men are dogs," yeah, well, you're gonna meet all men are dogs. You're gonna meet all the dogs. So it's funny because I would say, "I'm never gonna get married," and and I would say it with passion and intensity, and I've never got married. I'm 44. So now at this age, I'm like, I'm speaking positive about relationships. So I've
Mm,
turned that around, and I'm like, no longer gonna say that because I don't want to call that negativity in, but again, law of attraction, right? I don't want to call negativity in, and I've been practicing for relationships.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
and those
yeah.
and those thought patterns, right? Be it in relationship or could be in any other area of life.
Any, yeah.
We are very it's unconscious, right? Sometimes
It
those
is. It
habits,
is.
patterns just start since we're childhood, or I don't know what time we adopted. It's not about that we intentionally say it, but it's unconscious habits and patterns. But I
Yeah.
think, like you said, it's very important to recognize those and switch those around
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
our benefit. So I think
Yeah.
that's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, and I'm prime example. And this is why I will scream to all those seven winds or whatever winds in the universe, because it is so true. I was like, oh my God, I did this to myself.
Mm,
Right? When it comes to relationship, I did this to myself. I'm like, I would say negative things
mm,
and like, oh, I'm never gonna, they're all the same, or they're cut with the same scissors, or like there's just this negative stuff. But I never said about money. I never had that negative lack mindset about money. I never said, oh, I can never get this. I can never, ever have I said anything negative about money.
mm,
I
mm.
ever since I would be like, I can make this much, and I can make this much, and I can do this, and I can, and I'm just like, oh my God, I did this to myself when it comes to relationships. So I recognize it. I recognize it, and I want, and I want the listeners to, hear me out. And sometimes I know it's, we can become very negative, and sometimes we don't want to become cynics, right? We don't want to believe.
Mm,
But I'm telling you, I know if it hasn't worked out, it's because you've been very negative. You've been saying
mm,
negative stuff, like when it comes to whatever area of your life that you're
mm-hmm,
trying to grow in, so, or
mm.
improve.
Yes, absolutely. So, in this process of writing the book, right? I know this includes, years of your experiences, life lessons. So, in this process of researching and writing the book, what additional things did you learn about yourself which you didn't know before writing the book?
Honestly, just just become an author, period. Like that's just thinking that, like, I've never in my entire life thought that I was going to write a book,
Hmm.
and that I did it myself. Like, through just learning, and again, education, and personal development, right? And taking the right courses. And I'm like, you know what? I write a book, and how can I organize it? And how can
Mm,
I actually sit down and write it? So those are the things, right? Because I never would have thought that I
mm,
would actually achieve that, or sit down and say, I'm going to write this book. And at first it was a little overwhelming, because I'm like, oh my God, is this going to sound like it's gonna flow? And am I articulating the message here the way I want to articulate it? So those were the things that I actually, I'm happy and proud that I was able to do that.
mm. Yeah, you
Mhm.
unlocked a new potential
Yes,
that was
yes.
inside you
And
already.
I haven't announced it yet, but I haven't announced it to anybody yet. But I do have I have this 31 day um find your purpose, a
Mm,
journal out there in on Amazon, but I really haven't advertised it. So I created another book.
mm. Okay.
And then I'm gonna be actually translating this book in Spanish
Oh,
for the Latin community. Yeah.
that's
Spanish speakers.
amazing. So I think by the time we launch the episode, you probably will have that book
Yes.
in Amazon.
God willing. Yeah, God willing.
So, Brenda, if people could take away one thing out of this conversation today, what would you want that to be?
So yeah, so like what I would tell them is what's your why? What's your why for anything, right? For like your purpose of investing. Is it because, oh, you just want to invest? No, make it a strong why, right? Is it because you want financial freedom? You want to have be stress free. It feels so good, so amazing not to worry about money,
Mm,
right? And to know that you've acquired enough knowledge and you have a strong why, you probably acquired so much knowledge that you feel so safe and certain and secure that, you know what, you put your money where it should be, and you're gonna be okay in the long run.
Mm. You know, being financially aware and learning about investing, how has this personally helped you in your own life? You know, has it made, what kind of difference or impact has it made in your personal life?
I would say I'm able to experience different things in life, you know, like traveling. One of the things I just recently traveled to Roatan, which is the island of Honduras. I'm from Honduras, by the way.
Mm.
And never in my life would I have imagined Brenda coming from this very poor town in Honduras, the mainland. I never knew that we had such a beautiful island. And had I not invested, had I not, um, worked extremely hard to get to where I am now financially and just to stay the course, I would have never experienced the beautiful island of Honduras, which is Roatan. And
Mm.
I think that's like the best thing is that you're able to go to any country now. You can travel because you can financially, right? You can do it financially because you can travel and you're able to pay for your tickets and everything, and you can afford it. So that's major for me, that I was able to leave that little poor impoverished town and experience the richness of the world.
Mm. Wow. That's very inspiring. Brenda, could you please share with our listeners what's the best way to connect with you further if they would like to learn more about you and what you do?
Oh, sure. So they can follow me on Instagram. I typically use Instagram the most. It's I am Brenda Carolina. So that my middle name is Carolina. So I am Brenda Carolina. I do have a TikTok where I do share videos on investing, and I kind of give you a lot more information in there, and it's the same. I'm Brenda Carolina, and you'll see my link on Instagram. You can see the link tree, and there's other links you can just pick in there. So,
Mm, okay. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I will be including all of those links in the show notes below so people know where to connect with you further. But again, thank you so much for such a great
Oh
conversation.
no, thank you for having me. I had an amazing time.
Yes. And for those of you listening, if you're curious about investing and don't know where to start, this book is great. If you are already into investing and want to max out your investments, check out Brenda's book, Max It Out, and it's a great idea for a gift as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me this week on The Reset Mantra. I am Sabina Maharjan. Join me again next week, and in the meantime, please subscribe and leave me a review. If you have someone who you think will be great on the show, please get in touch and find me and the podcast on Instagram at I am Sabina Maharjan and at The Reset Mantra. I'm so looking forward to next week, and I'll catch you then.